Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unwrapping the wild, unexpected, and frankly, riotous history of Christmas in early America. Seriously, you might want to forget everything you think you know.
You know, when we think of Christmas, our minds probably go straight to what's on the left, right? Peace, family, joy, silent night. But for the first couple hundred years in America, well, the holiday was a whole lot closer to what you see on the right. We're talking rioting, extortion, and nights that were anything but silent.
So, the big question is, how on earth do we get from that to, well, to this? How did a season of debauchery and violent street parties transform into the quiet, family-centric holiday we know today? All right, let's get into it.
Okay, so our story starts not with, piety and prayer, but with this really old European tradition, basically a season of what you could call organized chaos, known officially as Misrule.
See, for hundreds of years, December wasn't really seen as a holy season. It was all about practicality. Think about it. The farm work was done for the year, you had all this fresh meat from slaughtered animals that you had to eat before it went bad, and hey, the beer and wine from the fall had just finished fermenting. So what do you get? Lots of free time, lots of booze, and tons of food. Yeah, you get citywide partying. Big time.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. Check out this description from the famous Puritan leader Cotton Mather, all the way back in 1712. Now, he's not talking about some small group of rebels. No, he is describing the mainstream Christmas of his day. Honestly, it sounds less like a religious holiday and a whole lot more like a month-long Mardi Gras, right?
So naturally, this brings us to the Puritans. And they didn't just, dislike this kind of Christmas. Oh no, they saw this whole misrule culture as totally pagan and corrupt, and they basically declared all-out war on it.
I mean, their goal was pretty radical. They wanted to completely tear down this old cycle of work then party, and in its place, a culture of year-round discipline and self-control. Basically, the only break they thought you needed was the weekly Sabbath. That's it.
And wow, for a while there, they were actually pretty successful. This image here just says it all. For decades in New England, Christmas was pretty much erased from the map. I mean, look at this almanac from 1739. December 25th is just another Tuesday. They even had court scheduled for that day. The holiday in any official sense just didn't exist.
But, you can't just snap your fingers and erase centuries of tradition. The old ways of misrule, they just wouldn't die. They kept bubbling up in stuff like wassailing, which, let me tell you, was a far cry from the gentle Christmas caroling we think of today.
So think of it like trick-or-treating, but for grown-ups and with a real sense of menace. It was this ritual where the social order got flipped on its head. For one night, the poor felt they had a right to the property of the rich, and they'd go demand their share. The treat wasn't just hoped for, it was expected. And the trick, if they didn't get it? Yeah, that could easily be vandalism or straight-up violence.
And let's look at a real-life example of this, straight from the court records in Salem from 1679. This was not friendly caroling, folks. You have 4 young guys showing up demanding pear wine from a 72-year-old man. He says no. They insist, saying, hey, it's Christmas night, we have a right to this. And when he still refuses, they lay siege to his house, throwing stones and bones at it for an hour and a half. Can you imagine?
So the key thing to get here is that this wasn't just some one-off event. This was what they called a wassail gone bad. It was a perfect example of this clash between the old, rowdy folk culture and the new, orderly world that Puritan leaders were desperately trying to create.
So, if laws and sermons couldn't stamp out the Christmas party, what finally did the trick? Well, ironically, the agents of change were 2 things the Puritans themselves were huge fans of: literacy and the printing press. You could say the battle for the soul of Christmas was actually fought in print. For years, you had the Puritan almanacs, like that one on the left, just completely ignoring the day. But then, in 1686, England's royal governor steps in and basically forces the colony to recognize the holiday. And bam, the floodgates just burst open. Printers started to openly defy the old Puritan ways. And as you can see right there on the right, just 2 years later in 1688, they're defiantly printing Christmas Day in all caps for everyone to see. The holiday was officially back. And once Christmas was back, the printing press started to slowly tame it. First off, you had almanacs starting to publish verses that praised, temperate mirth. Basically, have fun but don't get crazy drunk. Then, and this is huge, for the first time ever, printers started distributing sheet music for hymns about the Nativity. It gave people something totally new to sing about. And third, all this new music helped create these singing schools. And this was brilliant, because it took all that chaotic energy from young people that used to go into a salling and channeled it into something much more respectable, the church choir. So you see this slow but steady shift happening, right? It's moving away from public chaos and towards private piety. And that change really paved the way for a whole new kind of Christmas, one that left the streets and moved into the home, focusing on family and, most importantly, on children.
You can see this whole transformation just by looking at the changing meaning of a single term, the Christmas box. Originally, that was a literal clay pot that young apprentices would carry around to ask for and sometimes demand money. It was basically a tool for public begging. But over time, the meaning completely flipped. It became what we know today, a private gift, usually something you give to a child.
And here's a perfect example of that older tradition in action. This is a printed card that a blacksmith's apprentice would give to his boss's customers. It's basically a fancy, printed way of asking for a holiday tip. But as that culture started to fade, a new one popped up. Printers started making books with titles like Nurse Truelove's Christmas Box, and they marketed them directly to kids. This really helped lock in the holiday's new identity as this domestic, child-focused event.
By the early 1800s, the old rowdy ways were pretty much gone. The new powers in town were commerce and this new culture of domestic life. And get this, Boston newspapers, the same ones that 100 years earlier wouldn't even print the word Christmas, were now filled with ads for Christmas and New Year's gifts. The transformation was just about complete.
So the violent, drunken street party was dead, and in its place we have this quiet, respectable, commercial family holiday. But there was still one final piece needed to really cement this new version of Christmas in the American mind. And that piece was a poem, first published in 1822. And of course, you know that poem. It's a visit from St. Nicholas, or as we all call it now, 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. And here's the final amazing irony of the whole story. It was Santa Claus whose influence finally finished the job the Puritans had started centuries earlier. This new, beloved character provided a myth that completely transformed Christmas from a season of public chaos into a day of quiet family joy. And that is how we got the holiday we have today.